He said, I know that there's people been thinking about racing a Lincoln. And he looked at it, kind of shook his head and said, okay, well, if that's what you want to do, that's what we'll do. And that car as it sits right now was better than any T-Bird we had.
I wonder how much different my life would have been and some of your lives would have been if this car made it to the track. There's a car behind you that not very many people know about, and we want to hear more about it straight from
the horse's mouth.
Exactly.
Yeah, or the horse's something. Yeah. The car behind me is a car that never was. It's here, but as far as NASCAR and racing is concerned, it never was, because it never got on the racetrack. The background from that whole situation was that back in the 80s and early 90s, we were racing the Ford Thunderbird, and it was a very successful automobile. But one day in the mid 90s, Ford Motor Company and the leader of the Ford teams, the guy that was in charge of Ford Performance at the time, was a man by the name of Dan Rivard, and he called me and said, Don, we have a situation, I want you to be aware of it, and I need your help. And I said, well, we'll do whatever we can. We're a Ford team, and I like Dan especially. He's a good guy. And he said, at the end of next year, we're going to stop building Thunderbirds. I said, what? You got to be kidding me. What are we going to race? And he said, well, that's what I'm here to talk to you about. That's what I want to talk to you about.
Just to preface this, you were like the main guy at Penske. We didn't say that. I was
the president of Penske Racing.
Okay, yeah. I just want to, I know that, but these guys don't know that.
And so anyway, Dan said, we're thinking about lots of options. Chevrolet has been able to build almost a special car for NASCAR racing and market it, to the public under the premise that it is the car that they're racing on the racetrack, which of course we know it isn't. But I said, at the time it was going to be the Laguna.
Oh, they were doing this too.
They were doing this too.
Oh, where's theirs at?
So anyway, so we'll look into some options. And he said, well, here's what we want to do. We want to make sure that it's something that we can build at the factory, so that that car, that whatever it turns out to be, is something that can be marketed to the public when we're done. Because that's, there's no sense of us racing something that we don't have. So I said, okay, I understand that. He said, I know that there's people been thinking about racing a Lincoln, and I said, yeah, I know, I've looked at that, but the Lincoln, it's not a car that, as it's built right now, it's not a car that can be raced successfully, because the deck lid, is tapered, it goes downhill. So, that just wipes out all your downforce, your rear downforce. So we have to find something else. He said, well, let me do this. He said, if we sent you a piece, every piece of sheet metal that we're making right now, and you took that sheet metal and repositioned it on the current chassis, could you come up with a combination that we could build at the factory as a particular car? I said, I really don't know, but we'll try. So we got the sheet metal shipped into Penske Racing, and David Little, who was in charge of our fabrication department at Penske Racing, he looked at it, kind of shook his head, and said, okay, well, if that's what you want to do, that's what we'll do. And so we started on it. He and David Kenny and Dave Roberts were the primary guys that were involved with it. And he started assembling the sheet metal, and what you see behind me is a combination of those parts and pieces. It's got a Lincoln Mark VIII hood, a reproduction of it really, custom-made front fascia that looks somewhat like a Lincoln, or a combination between a Lincoln and the existing Thunderbird. And and then the side panels on it are just hand fabricated like they always were back then, you know, just flat sheet metal. The deck lid on the car is from a Lincoln town car, and we refabbed the rear fascia off of a Lincoln town car as well. So, and the roof is just an existing Thunderbird piece of sheet metal, which we could use that, or we could use, you know, something off a Lincoln or something off a current Ford, whatever. It was real simple. So we put all the pieces together, tried to stay within the limits of the rule book as far as heights and widths and everything goes, and the end result is the car that you see behind us. Now, when it was all done, the people at our shop looked at it. It was split about 50-50 as to whether this thing could be a success or not, you know, because it was actually about 4 inches longer than the existing T-Bird, but we could shorten that up a little bit with not much trouble at all. So we kind of shortened it up and rubbed on it a little bit, and then told the Ford Motor Company to take a look at it, and they sent their guys out and they looked at it and said, no, whatever. And we took it to the wind tunnel and put it in the wind tunnel, and everyone was shocked because that car as it sits right now was better than any T-Bird we had more downforce, and it had less drag, which was phenomenal because that just doesn't happen. You know, usually you have to give up one to get the other, you know?
Yeah.
And a lot of people attributed it to the total length of the car, and I mean, there was 1,000 different reasons why, you know, according to all the experts. But anyway, the fact of the matter was it was really good. So the next step was to say, okay, if we make, you know, 100 of these, like they do the Laguna or whatever, would it be legal? So the first thing we had to do was show it to NASCAR. And of course, when we showed it to NASCAR, they looked at it, and Gary Nelson came to look at it. And Gary and I never did see really eye to eye on a lot of things, but he said, Don, you can't race that. I said, why? He said, because you don't build it. Ford doesn't build it. I said, well, they will build it. Well, still, you know, we'd prefer you didn't do that. So I said, yeah, okay. And he said, the other thing is I want to see the wind tunnel numbers. Well, at this point, I didn't realize that, you know, all that information had leaked out, that it was really, really good wind tunnel wise. And of course, they knew where we did it and how we did it, and they wanted to see it. And he said, nah, we're not going to give you this car. I said, well, doesn't, you know, Mr. France have to be part of the decision? He said, well, I'm going to present it to him. So, you know, I was a little bit disheartened, and I knew that when he saw it, he was going to talk to the guys at Ford, and eventually get back to, you know, Dan Rivard, and probably maybe even go as high as one of the Ford family. And so as time went on, and it wasn't very much time, it was probably a week, it came back to us, and they said, well, we were contacted by the Ford people. I think Dan Rivard's office called me and said, look, you know, they came to us and they told us they're not going to give us that car that you built because it doesn't fit the requirements that NASCAR has laid out as a guideline for a car like that for the Winston Cup series. I just shook my head and kept going. But then I heard from Dan Rivard, and Dan Rivard said, look, he said, we're whipping a dead horse. He said, we can't go further with this because of two things. Number one, yeah, we'd have to build 150 or 200 of them, which wouldn't be the end of the world. He said, but the one thing that is a real ripper is Mr. Ford looked at it and said, and I'm talking Edsel Ford, he said, look, we're not going to do that. We're going to race what we build and sell every Sunday. So we're going to race a in the very near future. We're going to race a Taurus. A Taurus. That's a four-door, you know. He said we're going to race a Taurus because that's what we build, and you need to get thinking about it. So it wasn't too much longer, and I was notified by all the powers that be that, you know, this thing was dead. This was from then on in, it was to be called an aero study car. So it was dead. It was never going to race, and that we needed to start looking for a new car, and that new car was going to be a NASCAR Taurus. Now, outside this building right now, on the outside of the museum itself, you'll see there is a Taurus out there. It's one of one, and that's the second part of the story.
If you want to hear the story behind this car and the role it played in the Taurus's development, leave a comment. I'm not going to say anything, but if you know what you're looking at, and you know why it's different. I do have some questions about this, though.
Yeah.
Do you think if the order of operations of this car were handled differently, that it would have made it to the track? Like if you didn't involve NASCAR at all, and you just built this, and then Ford built it, it wasn't going to work because Ford didn't want to do it.
Now, Ford was not going to do that because they wanted to make sure it was approved before they put millions of dollars behind building a car like that. They wanted a guarantee that it was going to be able to be raced. When you're building one of these things, you build the whole car, and then you kind of tweak it until you make it as good as it can be. It's always better to have a transition from the roof down to the deck lid in a swale. That's a swale.
So is this part of what made it so much better than the Thunderbird?
No, it's everything. The height of the roof, the back window, one of the things that gave it so much rear downforce is look at the tops of these quarters and the flatness of that deck lid. It's like looks like the landing strip on an aircraft carrier.
So then what's the timeline on this car? The project was axed, it was aero study. Where did it sit until it ended up here?
Where did it sit? It was in a warehouse for a while, and then they said, what are you going to do with it? And I said, I'll just take it over and put it in the museum.
We're glad you did that.
Yeah.
Was there anything else like that never made it to a museum?
Oh, I'm sure there's plenty of them, but you'll never hear about them.
You know, just hearing that story makes me think what could have been with this. Didn't you say there was some kind of dispute as to what brand the car would be or what it would be called if it got built?
You know, Ford and Lincoln and Mercury, you know, they all had their representatives, you know. Lincoln Mercury people wanted to call it a Marauder, and the Ford division wanted to call it a SuperBird, I think. But of course, then, you know, everybody'd say, well, SuperBird's a Dodge, you know.
Yeah.
You know, so, but, you know, that's a lot of supposition there.
Not all you guys, but a lot of you guys are around my age, 25. You grew up looking at the NASCAR Ford Taurus, which, just to be completely honest, it's no surprise or secret that is just not a good looking car. It was just weird looking. I was a little kid, I thought the Taurus was like the ugliest NASCAR on the track. It was just bad. I gravitated towards Chevys. I thought the Monte Carlo was cooler. So what if they did make the Thunderbird SuperBird, and our whole generation grew up not thinking that the Taurus was the ugliest car ever made. How many more of us, I could be wearing a motorcraft looking shirt right now and I'm not. I don't know. I got nothing against Ford. I like Ford, but I really wish their cars were cooler looking, because I didn't want to have a toy Taurus. They were stupid. Like, it's just not a cool looking car. Luminas were cool, Monte Carlos were cool. The Taurus was just, bleh. I wonder how much different my life would have been, and some of your lives would have been, if this car made it to the track. What do you think? Discuss. Yeah, Mark Martin would have won a lot more races.
People would think Ford was cooler.
Yeah.
So that'd be cool.
No, he talks about in his podcast how they couldn't get him to hang the bodies low enough to get downforce right on those things. They got so much cool stuff in here. You're really worth checking this out. And this museum is not for profit. Everything that this place generates gets donated to the abused children of North Carolina. So if you're in the Mooresville region, you're going up and down I-77 for something, hop off exit 36 and check this place out. Also, they got a bunch of cool old stuff for sale in the gift shop, like die casts and things like that. You can pause and read that. So this is what he was talking about. It's got all kinds of little holes drilled in it. And also, if you like the shirt we're wearing and the hats and stuff, we have other things too. Check out staplesandautoworks.com. Check out the Racing History Nerd Zone playlist for more videos like this and future ones too.